everyone, welcome to our next Q&A session with Shusara. We're going to do another Conversations with Shusara, and we hope that you are enjoying these as much as we're enjoying doing them for you. Um, and I guess we'll go ahead, get right into it.
Sure.
So last week I had asked a question, and it was one of those where there was a whole bunch of questions, and one in particular that got left out was that the question was, what was it like to be you? And then it was a whole bunch. One thing that got left out was that comparing you to other masters, so like Muji, and how he dresses and he puts the blanket over his legs. Gangaji, she speaks very softly. So I think people have a perception of what they think that a master should look and behave and speak and all of that. So, and you're not any of those. So can you speak to that?
I will. I would first say that I would not call myself a master.
Okay.
And that's just something that I'm personally kind of particular about. Feel free to call anybody else a master, but I don't put that label on myself. As a guide, there's one teaching that's a beautiful thing that's very hard to get people as seekers who are really identified as seekers to truly understand. And that is that there is only ever one teacher, and there is only ever one guide. And that is the self, capital S. The eternal itself is the teacher and the guide. And so when you are, as a seeker, in the presence of one where the personal self is not the thing that's presenting, then you're in audience with God directly. So whether that be through the form of Muji or the form of Adiyashante or the form of Papaji or whomever it is, Jesus, the Buddha, it's all the same. It's just the self. Now, each teacher here, of course, will present differently. And that's necessary because, let's face it, there are people in the East who will very much associate with if they follow Advaita, they will very much associate with a certain look, with a guide that maybe wears all white and a guide that places a blanket over a lap or wears, sandalwood paste on the forehead. That's very comfortable for them because that's their tradition. So there need to be guides in place where they will appeal to those people. And it's true everywhere around the world. So of course, there will be those of us placed around the world to appeal to the sensibility and the societal constructs of where we're put to do our work. Someone like myself is a little unusual in that you have someone presenting as a very kind of Western person and very much outside of our traditional concept of what a guru or a mystic or a sage is, female and a householder in Eastern wording, married with children, and I'm not old yet, right? Middle-aged woman, so all of these things kind of fly in the face of what we think a guide to be. And it's meant to be that way because it challenges, of course, some of the foundation of your belief. And if your belief as a seeker is that this is what the teacher looks like or this is what the guide looks like, then I'm meant to challenge that. I'm meant to be the person that you come in contact with who turns that completely upside down and shows you, wow, here's someone who, like, from all outside appearances looks like a normal person, right? Seems to be living a normal life. But yet there's this other thing that's moving that is outside of all of it. And it does confuse the mind very much, with my Students, they all come to a place of it's just confusing because it's like, well, wait a minute, how can you be a mom but then you teach at this level, and that's exactly what teachers like myself are being called to do at this point, is to really present that way, because where we have to move to is a place where the collective recognizes that it's not about pigeonholing anybody or categorizing people as far as, being a teacher in this religion or this religion. The point is to get the collective to understand there's only the one appearing as all. And that when it comes to teachers, when you speak to me or you speak to Muji, you're actually speaking to the same exact being, right? It is the self. Does that answer the question?
It does. And I have to say, I really wasn't expecting that answer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it was great because, like I said, people expect a guide to look a certain way. And I thought it was going to kind of be more about, what you were saying about how people are, they have this this belief of what a guide should look like. But when you went into the whole thing about that there really is only one,
yes,
and I was like, oh, wow, like that was, like it brought in a whole new level for me for that. So,
right.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and I'll add on just a kind of a personal story. I had one student at one point who was very much a student of the Course in Miracles. Beautiful work. And I'm very closely aligned with the being that people refer to as Jesus. I would refer to personally as Yeshua, in his role here, Sananda outside of this planetary role he played. And this person really struggled with exactly what I'm saying to you, because in his world, there's Jesus. And then in his world, there's all the other teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept trying to show him, no, there's no separation. I am Jesus. Jesus is me, because it's not personal. It's the self. The thing that presents is the self, and the self is singular, period. Period. Mm-hmm. So whether, you're trying to separate something that can't be separated, and this individual just wasn't ready to really take that in. I mean, that is a huge leap for people, certainly. And especially when you have the moment where you're working with your guide and you recognize in that moment, in a way you've never recognized before, that you are having direct one-on-one communication with the eternal, with God itself. It's right there, looking back at you and speaking directly to you. And that is a powerful moment, a very powerful moment that certainly does shift things. And then you do see that for what it is. But yeah, that's just a little personal story, and how I watch seekers struggle with that, or seekers who know myself and know my guide and think of us as two different beings. Well, of course we're individuated, right? And we appear separate, and we appear to have individual lives and whatever else, of course. But the teacher is the singular energy that is God. That is the teacher, moving through this form and moving through this space and this voice and all of that. It's always the same thing. So whether you speak to one or the other, honestly, doesn't matter. Now, one can carry more experience, certainly. So if you look at my guide and myself, let's say my guide has been doing this level of work for, say, 30 years longer than I have here on the planet. So of course, there's going to be wisdom through direct experience that person carries that I wouldn't necessarily carry. Well, of course, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't, you have to be careful, because the mind wants to place everybody in a very hierarchical kind of place. And mm-hmm. that would make this person better than this. And that is so not what's going on here. The self is the self, period. And there's no separating it out. So that is a huge teaching. I'm glad you asked the question and that it came forward the way it did, because that is a very, very important teaching for seekers of all levels and from every tradition. Really important.